Welcome back to the PI show. Before the break, we were talking with Gary Allen, a forensic accountant, about issues relating to economic loss and financial loss in the future where people are injured. And it's a very difficult topic to get to terms with in a lot of situations where we come across, firstly, situations where people tell us there's cash in hand. And again, the earnings isn't reflected in their tax returns. So again...
Well, there's this interesting case of finding gear where you had that waiter that was working.
Yeah, he was a waiter.
He was declaring X amount of dollars, $250 a week, I think it was, and he says he was earning another $150 cash.
Plus tips from patrons as well. How do you quantify it?
Well, first of all, you rely on his evidence for a start, and if he's convincing, that might be enough to convince the judge. But if you're having trouble there, we'd certainly be looking at what other waiters would be earning in a similar environment, not in a completely different waiting environment, but a similar environment, what they were earning. And people are well aware that tips are a common part of earnings for that sort of occupation. So the other thing we could do in that situation is look at what the person's spending, so that if we know he's spending a certain amount every week, we can assume that that's got to be coming from his earnings.
Harry, I've got a real problem with people saying they haven't put in cash into their tax returns and trying to prove that in a court of law.
There's one danger you've got to warn people about is the judge can refer that to the DPP.
Exactly.
And they can be prosecuted for having a defective tax return.
And by the time you work out all the fines and penalties and taxes they haven't paid, you're probably so much worse off. So
it can be, and
yeah.
I think
it's horses for courses. I mean, you've got to look at the whole picture. I mean, what is the situation here? What can you get by succeeding what you're trying to achieve? Yeah. And what are the downsides?
Well, in this case, Harry, what happened was that the judge didn't accept his evidence, so he missed out on the cash.
No, he accepted that he earned some tips. He didn't accept he was earning the extra $150 in cash, and he didn't find the plaintiff credible. But he did accept he was earning a little bit for cash, but he had drug problems. He had erratic behaviour, and he accepted $120 net per week for 12 years. So the income wasn't too bad, I thought.
Well, the point that I would draw from that case is that it wasn't struck out completely.
Yeah.
So what the point is that if you can establish that you have got this earning, whether it's in your tax returns or not, then you're sort of at first base. Then there are other issues that surround that, but ultimately it hasn't been just struck out altogether.
He had a lot of other problems as well. He had hepatitis C, which was going to affect his health, and also been in prison for a period of time. So, the judge's got to take that into account too, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Gary, isn't the starting point really a person's retained capacity for work? They have an injury, and you've really got to look at what restrictions you place on that person's capacity to work.
But this is a situation where they're returning to work and earning a little bit of money.
Yes, well, what we're trying to do is work out what their loss of earning capacity is, and so it's the loss. So they had an earning capacity, and now do they still have some sort of earning capacity? And we need to establish, well, how that's going to be carried out in the future. How many hours are they going to work? Are they going to be able to work full time? Are they going to be able to do everything in the particular job that they decide to do? Maybe reduced hours. Maybe they have to have an assistant. Maybe they can only work really at about sort of 70%. They're doing everything, but they're just doing it slower.
Yep.
And I think what you often see in these cases is that someone will come along with an advertisement from the Geelong Advertiser or the Age or something and say, or Seek.com and say, well, look, this person is going to be whatever it might be, and here's an advertisement that says that that person can earn $500 a week. Well, I guess what I have trouble there is, well, that's for a person that's experienced, that's probably been doing, if you're going to advertise for a waiter, for example, we were using the waiter before, What they're looking for someone is been a waiter before, whereas the man you've just been describing to me has never been a waiter before in his life. But he thinks he could be a waiter, he'd like to be a waiter.
Do you know what I found extraordinary, Harry? They say that people with back injuries should be doing sedentary type work, and that means more often than not they're sitting down. Funny enough, when I hurt my back, one of the things I couldn't do was sit down.
Sit down, yeah.
That's extraordinary, really, when you think about it.
I think what I'd be trying to do if I'm establishing the earning capacity of someone going back to work would be looking at perhaps talking to some of the employment agencies that specialise in putting people that have been injured or with disabilities back into work. They'll give you a much better idea about what a person with some sorts of limitations and no experience can earn than you'll get by looking at Seek or My Career or something like that, where all those advertisements are for experienced people. And by definition, your injured person doesn't have that experience.
Yeah. No, it's it can be very unfair and very harsh. And again, depends on evidence and depends on, as you say, how the person presents. But your job's to give the figures. I think it's helpful sometimes to give a number of scenarios of what could happen, and the courts ultimately have to choose one or two. Out of the 2 or 3 scenarios, they might choose one, depending on evidence. But I think for a forensic accountant, for us to present the case, we rely on you to present different scenarios in the future of what can happen. The other situation we talked about briefly was something like a medical student who's driving a taxi who's injured, and he wanted to become a specialist. What's he lost in earning capacity?
Well, he certainly lost his earning capacity as a specialist.
He can't work, or possibly could work in some alternate employment.
Well, that situation is already provided for in the law in a way, in that it allows for looking forward to what the person would have done, even though they were doing something else. So that's quite well established. Just how much that person would have earned is something that you'd be putting some evidence forward on.
So what would you do? Would you look at past results?
Other specialists, what they earn.
And as you say, he might still have some capacity, but not quite as much. So again, you're looking at the...
He's studying medicine. Chances are he'd be a doctor, but what's to say he's going to be a specialist? That's speculative, isn't it?
Would you be looking at the past history of their study, what the parents did, and so on, so that you'd be trying to establish that there was a likelihood that would happen.
Gary
That's all
and
you
Harry,
can do.
we seem to be... the show's moving along and time's running out, so look, we're going to have to stop now because we've got to go to another ad break.
And we're coming back with Vivian's mailbag. But thanks very much. I think there's a lot of issues that we have to grapple with, and loss of earnings is a very important part of the law, and we rely on someone like yourself to give us some ammunition to present before a court.
Well, thanks very much.
It's very helpful.
Talk to you.
Thanks very much.
We'll be back with Viv's mailbag, so keep watching, viewers.
Thank you.